Have milk past its sell-by date? Don't let it become part of the 30% plus food the average family wastes annually. I'm Marcia McDonald with Pacific Northwest Suburban Homesteading. Today, Shonna Zimmermann, in an example of homestead-style sustainability, will show us how to make Queso Blanco.
Hi, I'm Shonna Zimmermann, and I just discovered a gallon of whole milk that somehow got pushed to the back of my refrigerator and forgotten. Fortunately, I found it when it's only a couple days past its sell-by date, which is not the same thing as the expiration date. If the dairy did its math right, the sell-by date that they stamped on it indicates the last day that it can sit on the shelves in the store and still be sold and allow you a few days to a week of freshness to consume it. So this is still good, but I'm going to be realistic and admit that I probably can't use an entire gallon of milk before it actually spoils. But rather than let it go to waste, I'm going to make a simple and delightful type of homemade cheese called Queso Blanco. To clarify, this is not a recipe for the white cheese dip that's so good on nachos, which is sometimes also known as Queso Blanco. The Queso Blanco we're making is a mild, nutty cheese that has a soft and crumbly texture and the unique characteristic of not really melting in heat. It's great for spreading on crackers or sprinkling on salads or even hot dishes, but it will even hold up in stir fries like tofu will, and you can even bread it and fry it. Queso Blanco is sometimes called a farmer's cheese, and it's considered a fresh, unripened cheese. A fresh cheese means that it's ready to be eaten as soon as it's made, as opposed to cheeses that undergo aging. A ripened cheese is one that has had beneficial microorganisms introduced during the cheese-making process. Most hard cheeses that you're familiar with, like cheddar or Parmesan, even some soft cheeses, have had one or more strains of bacteria introduced to the milk to convert the lactose into lactic acid and to contribute to the character of the cheese. Mold-ripened cheeses like brie or blue cheese get additional flavor and aroma from the addition of beneficial mold spores, the most common of those being Penicillium roqueforti and Penicillium camemberti. You science fans out there probably already caught from the genus name that those are close cousins to the mold that gave us the world's first medicinal antibiotic, penicillin. Queso Blanco does not involve those aging or ripening techniques, so it's probably the simplest cheese that you can make at home. If, however, cheese making is something that interests you more, my favorite beginner-friendly guide is the highly rated Home Cheese Making by Ricky Carroll.
The equipment that you'll need is a large pot with at least a 6-quart capacity for every gallon of milk that you're going to use. You're going to need a food thermometer and something to stir with. You're also going to need a fine mesh sieve or a cheese mold if you have one, a piece of clean muslin or a tea towel that's at least twice the size of your sieve, and a rubber band or piece of twine to tie the fabric shut. It is also helpful to have a small plate that fits inside your sieve and something that will provide a couple pounds of weight. I'm improvising today and using a can of refried beans.
For your ingredients, 1 gallon of preferably whole milk is recommended. 2% will work in a pinch, but anything with a lower fat content will result in less yield and a lackluster rubbery texture. The only other ingredient you're going to need is a food-grade acid, such as vinegar or lemon juice. The amount of acid that you're going to need depends on which one you use. Vinegars take 1/4 to 1/2 cup per gallon of milk, while lemon juice or other citrus juices such as lime will take twice that. The first time you make Queso Blanco, I recommend you use plain distilled white vinegar. That will give you Queso Blanco in its simplest form and let you become familiar with the flavor profile and the characteristics that you're going to get. But once you've gotten to know your queso, Then you can start playing with acids that impart an extra layer of flavor, like those citrus juices or malt or apple cider vinegar. Because this is about my 712th batch of Queso Blanco, I decided to use my homemade white wine vinegar. Those of you who have been following this channel for a while may remember how this was made in a previous video. If not, go check out this channel for the link. I didn't use the red wine vinegar that we made in that video because I know from experience that it will end up dyeing the cheese pink. And don't ask what color I got the one time I tried to make this with balsamic vinegar. Yikes. Your first step is to just pour all of your milk into the pot. Then attach your thermometer to the side of the pot so that the bulb or probe at the bottom is fully submerged in the milk. Turn your burner on to the lowest setting. The temperature of the milk needs to come to between 185 to 190 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a little bit below the boiling point. Heating the milk to that temperature in this slow way denatures the proteins, which makes them able to bond into curds with the fat molecules and separate from the liquid whey when we add our acid. Now, if you were to add acid to cold milk, it would definitely sour it a bit and it would thicken it up a little bit, but you wouldn't get the formation of the large curds that we need to make cheese. However, that does have a purpose of its own. Here's a bonus tip from me to you. If you were to mix 1 tablespoon of lemon juice or vinegar with 1 cup of cold milk, that is an excellent substitute for buttermilk in baking. So if you feel like making a loaf of soda bread but don't want to run to the store to get yourself a pint of buttermilk, keep that trick in your back pocket. Now we're just going to let our milk heat up. For a gallon of milk on low temperature, it could take a half hour or more to reach 190 degrees. While it's coming up to temperature, you're going to want to check your thermometer every 5 to 10 minutes and give it a good stir just to make sure that the bottom doesn't scorch. While that's simmering up to temperature, now is the time to prepare your strainer cloth.
Once we reach the step of the curd formation with our cheese, we'll then need to drain off the liquid whey. The easiest way to do this is by lining a fine mesh sieve, or cheese mold if you have one, with a loosely woven piece of cotton fabric like muslin or a loose tea towel. We're going to pour our curds and the liquid through this so that it can drain off. When we do that, I personally like to catch the whey by putting a rack on another pot, putting my strainer on top of that and draining the whey into it. The reason I do that is because whey makes an excellent fertilizer, especially if you have alkaline soil. This has a little bit of acid in it, will help balance out the pH. Whey also makes a surprisingly excellent substitute for plain water if you are baking bread, or you can pour it down the sink if you don't think you're going to use it. Whey does not have a very long shelf life. And if you don't have a fine mesh sieve or cheese mold, don't worry. Get yourself a regular bowl, and like we just did, line it with a piece of loose cotton, and I'll show you how to make that work when we're ready. Now let's go check on our heating up of the milk.
Starting to form just a little bit of skin on the top, so I need to start stirring a little more often. About 165 degrees. When it's steaming and you start to notice lots of tiny foamy bubbles, that means you're getting very close to the correct temperature. Little bubbles are fine, we just don't want the big bubbles that indicate that it's boiling. If it's boiling, then you have overcooked the milk and your curds will dry out and won't stick together very well. And there we have it, 190 degrees. Now it's time to add our acid to form our curds. Most cheese use an enzyme called rennet for curd formation. I'm aware that some people who may be okay with consuming dairy products but don't want to eat anything that actually comes from a slaughtered animal might have a problem with rennet. because it is derived from the stomach lining of a lamb or a calf. If that's the case, this is the cheese for you. Queso Blanco curds are formed entirely through the power of vinegar. Okay, so I'm going to turn the heat off now. I really don't need this anymore. I'm going to start with about 1/4 cup of vinegar. Just pour it in and give it a gentle stir. It will need a minute or so while the curds form. It is not instantaneous, but if it seems like it's taking a long time and not forming any curds, go ahead and just add a little more acid. Sometimes my homemade vinegars aren't as acidic as I think they are, so I just need to maybe add a few more tablespoons to finish the job. And like I mentioned earlier, if you're using lemon or lime juice, go ahead and just double all the liquid measurements I gave you. And they're starting to separate. Just give this another minute. I think I'm going to go ahead and add just another 1/4 cup of vinegar, just to be sure. Good curd starting to form there. And there we go, a clear separation of the greenish liquid, which is the whey, from the white, cloudy, clumpy curds. This is an actual pot of curds and whey. Why little Miss Muffet ate it in this stage, I'm not quite sure. Then again, she also ran away from a spider, so Muffet and I really just don't relate. So now it's time to drain the whey. First off, if you didn't have the sieve or cheese mold, grab your regular bowl that you lined with muslin, grab yourself a slotted spoon, and you're just carefully going to scoop a little in at a time until your bowl is full. You're going to take your corners of your fabric. Let's say this is full of the entire batch. This is just for demonstration purposes. You're going to twist it tight and tie it shut with a rubber band. You can see the whey is draining already. Nice and tight. Now, grab yourself a piece of twine or yarn, loop it around in a slip knot, and now you can hang it to drip dry. It's helpful to have everything as tight as you can because the pressure of the bag will help squeeze the extra whey out. I'm just going to hang it off this knob here. And I highly recommend putting a bowl under it to catch the drips, or you're going to have a mess on your counter. Now, if you do have a sieve or a cheese mold, you're just going to carefully pour everything through the fabric, and in my case into this pot so I can catch the extra. Reminder, this is hot, so be very careful and pour slowly. The whey should drain through the cloth and leave the curds behind. The draining is slowing down a bit, although it is about a quarter full at this time. The whey is having a little trouble getting through because the smaller curds are clogging up the fabric. If that happens, just get a spoon, scrape it away a little bit, and just let it go slow. Now I'm going to wait a few minutes for this to continue draining. All right, it's been about 10 minutes and most of the visible whey has drained out. So like last time, what we're going to do is gather up the corners of your muslin or your tea towel, wrap it up tight, give it a good twist to make sure there aren't any gaps. And then, as we did last time, put a rubber band on it. You don't have to be as tight as we wrapped it last time for the one that we were hanging to dry, because this is where our plate and our little improvised weights of a can of refried beans comes into play. By the way, this is still hot, so be careful. I'm going to put the plate in there on top of it, push it down a little bit, and then that can is just going to add a little extra weight to squeeze out any additional whey. It will take a few hours to drain, possibly to overnight, depending on the final texture you want. I'd like this batch to be soft and a little moist because I want to spread it on crackers. So I'm just going to let it drain for a couple hours. But if you want a drier, crumblier cheese that you can sprinkle over a dish of enchiladas, 8 hours, maybe overnight. So now we just have to be patient. I'm going to use this time to clean my equipment because cleaning as you go is some amazing kitchen advice. I might also go out and pick a few herbs because since I'm going to spread this on crackers, I might want to flavor it up a little bit. After that, I might go practice my bagpipes. All right, I think this has been draining long enough. So let's open the curd bag and see what we have. And empty it out onto a plate. And there we have it, a fresh batch of Queso Blanco. At this point, I like to add just a little sprinkle of salt. It adds a little flavor. Also, salt does have a preservative quality on cheese, but to be honest, I've never had a batch of Queso Blanco last long enough to worry about needing preservatives. So maybe just a teaspoon here. I'm also going to separate it out into a few separate dishes. While it was draining, I went out into my garden and minced up a little bit of fresh oregano, rosemary, and some freshly cured garlic. Just a little bit, keeping in mind that this is a very mild cheese, and if you're heavy-handed with the herbs and other mix-ins, it could completely overpower it. So there it is, Queso Blanco, the easiest cheese you can make from scratch. You know, it's funny, I was certain that I wouldn't be able to consume that entire gallon of milk before it spoiled, but I'm pretty sure I could eat all of this cheese in one setting.
A special thank you to Shonna Zimmermann for recording and sending me this video. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Until next time, be curious, keep an open mind, and never stop learning.